What's your take on substrate fabrication capacity here in the US?
Up to a week ago, I knew nothing about it. It was this thing people talked about, and finally, this company, and I'll say it, Remtech, Brian Beaulieu from Remtech asked me to come down and look at what he could do and see how we could help him, and it was a whole other world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Altium On Track podcast. I'm your host, Zach Peterson, coming to you from our brand new filming space. I'm here today talking with Dan Beaulieu, founder and president of DB Management Group. We've had Dan on in the past, and I always like having Dan come on to give us a good pulse of what's going on in the industry. Dan, thank you so much for coming back on to the Altium On Track podcast.
Zach, always my pleasure. I really enjoyed it last time, and I give you credit. I got a lot of attention. Your interviews grab a lot of the audience. I hear people talk about them, and frankly, I got a couple of opportunities just from that last interview. So thank you.
Well, that's awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
yeah.
I think I've been noticed by like two people out there in the wild at conferences. So I sometimes wonder who's watching, but it's always nice to get the validation from someone like yourself. So
No,
thank you very
no, I
much.
feel the same way. As a matter of fact, I got some wonderful opportunities, if I may say. One of them was with a group of, and I say this really truthfully, young salespeople, 30-year-old salespeople who called me after the interview. Their president called me and wanted me to help them and be their mentor, and I have ever since. Company's SDM and sales driven marketing, and I've enjoyed working with them. It's so refreshing to jump out of, as you can tell, my demographics and go hang out with 30-year-olds who are enthusiastic about sales and marketing. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could just give everyone in the audience just a brief refresher about who you are and what you do and some of the services that you provide within the industry.
Okay, well, I've been in the industry a long time. Before being a consultant, I was a sales leader in three organizations, three PCB shops. So that's where I get my background. I'm more of a right brain person. I was supposed to be an English teacher slash writer. I'm still a writer. I'm not technical at all, so I'm kind of an engineer whisperer, is what I am. I go into a company, find out what they do well, and then translate that for their marketing, their strategy, and their tactical sales direction. At any one time, I'm an acting sales manager, an acting marketing manager, strategist. I've worked with over 100 companies over the years. DB Management was started with a partner in 2000. I mean, in 1995, so it's 30 years old. I've been doing this a long time. And actually working with a lot of companies has given me valuable insight into an overarching of what's going on in the industry, and I use that to help people. I'm a student of marketing. I read 4 books a week on marketing. I love it. I read newsletters. I write a lot, and that part is my love. Happens to be printed circuit boards and printed circuit boards assembly and design. But if I'd gone into another field, I'd be doing the same thing with their product. You know what I mean?
With having so much experience in this space and having worked with so many different companies, I'm sure you've seen a lot of how the industry has evolved over the
Yes.
past 3 decades. And I feel like recently we've kind of entered this new era where maybe we haven't fully, reversed course when it comes to things like globalization and offshoring and that kind of thing. But people are definitely aware of it and they're talking about it and they're integrating it into some of the strategies that they're taking for product design and then sourcing and product
Yes.
manufacturing.
Yes.
So what are you hearing and what have you seen over the past, let's say, several years, and what's different from a lot of the rest of the time that you've been in the industry?
Well, I like what you say about globalization because I guess you would call me a Thomas Friedman economist, where I believe the world is flat, and I believe we all should be working together, unlike the geopolitical atmosphere today. But I think that shall pass, and I think we'll go back to working together. I mean, it's that's what I see. I see uh, European Asian companies having an interest in coming into this country, and I'll say right here, I think it would be good if they did. It would broad base all of us. To talk about the North American, let's talk PCBs and PCBAs. I think we finally are starting to work together a little bit. I wish we were to work a little more I wish we could unsilo. That's what I see. Uh, for example, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said, the thing about the Asian companies is that the thing about China is their government helps them with subsidy. Their government subsidizes them. They talk to each other, and they actually lend resources to each other. And I said, and what's wrong with that, by the way? I wish we'd do some of that. I think we should, if we did more of that, we'd get along better. I see some companies who I work with are coming on with technology and it's growing. They're coming on with marketing and it's growing. There's still too many companies that don't do that, and they need to understand that to be successful, you need to be found. You need somebody to know who you are. There are less than 130 PCB shops left in America. And what people don't realize is that about 90 of them are under $5 million. So we should be helping one another and boosting the industry, learning better technologies, working in collaboration with our vendor partners and our customer partners. I don't see as much going on as there should be. We all should be working together to create a better industry base, if you will, a stronger industry base. So that's what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing, there's a lot of confusion with the tariffs, and part of it is buyers don't understand the difference. They don't they're getting an awakening of what we have for resources in this country. I work with a $5 million quick turn prototype shop, and they're getting quotes for 10, 20 layer boards for 28,000 of them a month. So that, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Yes, that I know you're taking some China work and trying to bring it in the United States, plug it in. It's not, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We don't have any factories with 100 drills, 50 of them laser. We don't have those things. So the adjustment has to occur. I spend a lot of my time, always have, kind of Don Quixote tipping at windmills to the smaller shops. I love the smaller shops. I've always tried to work with them, but it's getting more and more difficult for them to survive. We've got at the top end, we've got kind of the car industry of the turn of the 20th century where, 2 or 3 bigger companies are putting companies together and making like GM did years ago. But the smaller guy who my heart goes out to is having a hard time, and I spend a lot of time. I actually look for those companies to help, Zach. I really do.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, you brought up the tariffs, and I never like to, make it a political
Yeah,
discussion
yeah,
necessarily, but I think the thing that has been really difficult for a lot of companies has been that it's been so fluid. It hasn't
yes,
just been like, this is the cost, because I think it would be a lot easier for businesses to just adjust to that
yes,
and probably go and identify what are some ways we can get around some of this and avoid passing it on to customers, and can we maybe use that to pressure our vendors to lower their price, and then everybody's happy, right? So I think the challenge with that has definitely been the fluidity. There's another issue you brought up, which is with the mom and pop shops,
mm-hmm.
and I think they have less of an ability to absorb things like tariffs and then higher costs for commodities and raw materials.
Yeah,
But there's been some consolidation recently in the
yes,
industry as well. You've got the big guys coming in and buying up the smaller guys,
yes,
and offshoring has of course led to a lot of the local PCB shops going overseas. But then you've also got that number of mom and pop shops being reduced through consolidation.
Right. Yeah, you do, and that's hard. I'm really torn on that because I work with some where it's worked very well with a venture capitalist, an understanding, empathetic venture capital company, and I work with others where the heart is taken away. Why did somebody start a board shop? You call it mom and pop. Why did somebody start? They love the industry. They love doing it. And there's a lot of confusion now because in the direction of a company, it's not one big company. It's a lot of small companies with different cultures cemented together. And I think they'll figure it out. I'm optimistic, but they're having a hard time with their different cultures. And somebody from a company over here is now in charge of a company over here, and they were once competitors, and there are clashes going on. I'm not going to name names, but they know who they are and people know who they are, and you can sense it in the disorientation of that. So that's not good. Now on the good side is I've watched some companies grow with very smart venture capitalists who are putting money in, helping them grow up the technology ladder, and then finding an acquisition, a partner that fits in very well with them. So it's a complementary arrangement. Those work the best. So it comes in both ways. And, some people are violently opposed to venture capitalists. Well, what are you going to do? They have the money. They have the money. Board shops seldom have enough money to go buy somebody else without getting money somewhere. That's a fact of life. So we need the venture capitalists. And really, if you look at the evolution of the industry, it's been it's been influenced by that kind of outside money coming in. Overall, I think it makes us better. I think it's just so difficult for a small guy to grow by himself without this.
Yeah, and this idea of a mom and pop shop is, I mean, you would never see that in the semiconductor industry, which is kind of the, sister to what we do here with PCBs. But one thing I'm wondering is if we would ever see like a foundry model come into the PCB industry where you have captive operations again, but they're still also building things for customers. Do you think we're ever going to see that kind of model? Because that exists in the semiconductor industry to an extent, and even Intel has tried to do that, right? They've tried to build up
Right.
Intel Foundry services, but they're still manufacturing their own products.
Well, I think to a certain extent, if I may say this, Green Source in New Hampshire has done that. My friend Alex Stopinski designed and built that facility in New Hampshire, and he built it for a Wheelan company because they wanted to build their own boards. They're the fire truck and police car light companies, okay? And they had a campus in New Hampshire, and they hired Alex to build what do you call it, a clean footprint type of shop of the future. And he did. And so they no longer build just Wheeling product, which was more pedestrian product, if you will, 2, 4, maybe 6 layer stuff, where now that facility can build any type of board, any technology. And customers are walking up the hill to Charleston, New Hampshire to give them orders for the other stuff. So I think that's what you're talking about. Now, I don't want to say anything false. I don't know if Schweitzer is doing that in their shop in Moscow, Idaho, right? I don't know if they're doing that. I know that was built for Schweitzer, who for years was looking for somebody to build their boards and had a hard time. Or Alex just built a shop for Elon Musk in Texas that's solely for his companies, building high runners of his company as well. But I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. I know at the end of IBM in Endicott, their giant shop in Endicott, they called my partner and I in to see if that shop could be merchanted. And it was like next to impossible because it was so specialized. And they ended up selling it and it became Endicott Circuits. So, yeah, I think there's truth in what you say. We'll see, you know.
Yeah, when I heard about the Elon Musk, I guess they're going to try and turn it into a gigafab for PCBs,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for what you said, to basically supply Elon Musk's companies.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of felt like somebody was reading my mind because I was thinking to myself like, why doesn't Nvidia, own the PCB manufacturing for all of their GPUs?
Hmm.
Why
Hmm.
doesn't, let's say, Supermicro, right? They build servers, right?
Right.
Why don't they own the manufacturing for all their motherboards, right? And
Right.
they can still contract out that capacity to other buyers.
Yeah. It would make sense. I think the one thing is the silos again. You know,
Sure.
I mean, does does Bezos and his Horizon want boards built in a SpaceX shop, for example, things like that. Uh, now we get into what I was talking about earlier. It would have been a lot easier if we believed in one another. I had a dear friend who was an inventor named Bob Tarswell. He was a real innovator. He's retired, and I got him to write articles. For a while, he worked for Sierra Circuits and wrote bleeding edge articles for iConnect. And he was always scared someone was going to steal his ideas. And I said, Bob, they're not going to steal your ideas. They're going to come up with 50 reasons why it won't work. And that's exactly what happened. That's my biggest gripe in this country. I don't want to get complaining is people see something from another shop and come up with reasons why this won't work. You know, I even the company you work with does the same thing. Altium, I mean they don't do it, but as Altium grew, I heard the other guys give me all the reasons why they're kind of cheating. That their growth is cheating. They're too common man. Everybody has their software. That's not fair. I heard all of those things instead of celebrating and say, hey, that model worked. I'm at this end of the design tool world. They're at that end, but it's useful. More people can use it. It's the same thing. I like my IT friends. They're still mad at Bill Gates because they didn't think that I should be able to use a computer. Because they like the backlashes, slashes, and the dots, and they loved all of that. And it's the kind of thing you run into anyway. I go off the track a little bit, but no, I think you're right. I think there will be some of that
Well, I
as there are
think,
fewer shops.
yeah, yeah, and I think that that's probably going to be pretty critical to development of capacity in another area, which folks in the PCB industry and I think folks in seats of power are starting to realize, which is substrates, and that is
Mm-hmm.
an area that you've actually been getting into recently at DB Management Group. What's your take on substrate fabrication capacity here in the U.S.?
Up to a week ago, I knew nothing about it. It was this thing people talked about, and finally, this company, and I'll say it, Remtech, Brian Beaulieu from Remtech asked me to come down and look at what he could do and see how we could help him. And it was a whole other world in terms of substrates, microelectronics. Like I say to people, no offense to where I come from, but we're like an undergraduate degree, like junior, and these guys are on the PhD level, and I'm pretty excited about it. Now, technology wise, don't ask me a lot yet. I don't know a lot about it. All I know is it's fascinating stuff. It's super high tech. It's 1/2 mil lines and spaces. It's square inch boards, 1 square inch boards. But I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated that it seems to be off in another world that we don't know a lot. I mean, I've been dealing with 40, 50 years with engineers, PCB engineers, who would refer to it once in a while, and I would just ignore it. I didn't know what it was, but it's obviously the future. It's micro. It's super high tech. Like this company, Remtech, has 75 employees, 25 are degreed engineers or EEs and chemical engineers as well. And so that I'm super excited to work with them because I want to learn. I want to not only learn, I want to bring their story out more so people understand what they do. And the nice thing for me, if I may say selfishly, is I don't have anybody I've ever worked with who competes with them. You know, they're off to the side, which is fun.
Well, I think the fact that they're coming to you and you're kind of trying to invigorate some growth for these companies, and whether it's through marketing or sales tactics or whatever. It sounds like you've done a lot of sales in the past, of course.
Yeah.
It sounds like they see the opportunity for growth, and
Yes.
that's really important because now they're saying, okay, we want a way to go out and capitalize on that. And so we're going to need some external help with this. And so let's bring in Dan. And that's
Yeah.
essentially kind of the thought process here. So in my view, that actually is a good thing, not a bad thing. I think the detractors out there would say, well, they're having such a hard time, they got to bring in a consultant. And I don't really
Yeah.
see it that way.
No, it's not. They're really not having a hard time. They've got a nice growth going. They really do. They just it's an occasion where literally the sky is the limit. Okay, and I always try to do things a little bit altruistic. It's good for them, but I think it's good for the industry. I think people need to know what they can do because then, we'll get better end products. That's what I'm interested in, their end products. You know,
Definitely.
finding putting them out to the next new thing, the next great thing. Oh, if I had that 10 years ago, I would have developed this. I'd be long on my way to developing it. I didn't even know about this. That's my job, to put it in front. At the end of the day, my job is always to try to make things better. It's nice if money hits me on the way sometimes. That's nice. But it's really, I have found if you really try to help good causes, you're taken care of. That's my motto, if you will.
So you brought up articles a little bit earlier, and speaking of articles, the folks out there listening who are also avid readers of iConnect will certainly have seen your smiling face in the author section of
Yeah.
articles in iConnect. And you have a pretty big milestone coming up, which is that you're about to publish, or by the time this airs, may have already published,
Yeah.
your 1,000th article in iConnect.
That's right. Yeah, I really can't shut up. You know, I, I just, and I have a lot to say, and I enjoy it. I mean, yeah, you're right. Thanks for mentioning it. Next Monday, I think it's the 25th of that will be my 1,000th article. I started in 2005 writing. I met Barry and Ray from iConnect, good guys. I have to give a shout out. The iConnect has always been very generous to me. Let me put in anything I want, interviews or whatever, and I really do appreciate that. And yeah, in 2005, I did it, and for the first year, it was monthly, and then I went to weekly. And back then there were a lot of audio versions. I think I'm the only audio version left of a column, So no, it's been good. It's been fun, and I have them all. I have them all. Like I think 400 or 500 are on my website. They have them, and it's fun to see the evolution. And sometimes I'll put them together in a compilation of all the ones about reps, all the ones about marketing, the ones about being found, the ones on technology, different ones. But yeah, thanks for mentioning it. It is a pretty good milestone. It's actually a week later will mark the 20th year exactly when I wrote the first one. So yeah, enjoy it, and I plan to keep going for another 1,000. We'll see if they'll still have me. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, get for folks that are interested in reading, check out the link in the video description if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll have a link to that article. So it sounds like this will be published by the time the podcast comes out.
Sure.
But if you could, just give us a quick preview. What are you talking about in the 1,000th article?
The thousand
It's an important article because so it's got to be a good topic.
Well, it's kind of where have we been, and that we still have issues. There's still company. I tried to make it positive, but every week I see the same old stuff. Like you need to be found, the marketing, get out there. So there's a lot of that. a little bit of evolution of what's occurred in the industry. In 2005, we were at probably 1,300 North American shops were, 130. So we talk about that, and it talks a little bit about the future. I just had fun with it. And I did my, every so often in the columns, I will do it's from Grapes of Wrath, where people are hungry, you'll find me there, that kind of thing. Also from the Ghost of Tom Joad thing by Springsteen. That ends with that. Like, wherever a board shop's in trouble, you'll find me there. Wherever somebody needs help, you'll find me there. And that's I think I always like that because it kind of summarizes what I'm trying to do.
So with 1,000 articles, right? You've mentioned a few different topics, right? So being found, I guess that would be how do manufacturers stand out from the crowd? What are some of the other topics that you've talked about?
I spend a lot of time, and I even give courses on super customer service. Okay. Yeah, because look, the board shops have all gotten to be very simple. They're all good. I mean, when I started in the board industry, 80% yields was pretty good. 80% on time was pretty good. It's not anymore. We're at 98, 99. And so how are you going to differentiate? And the secret weapon is customer service, super customer service. I write a lot about that. I mean, sometimes I get a little tough. I'll say, an automated phone system says you don't care about your customer. To me, an automated phone system, you don't care about your customer. For crying out loud, hire somebody who's going to answer the phone, let him or her do other things at the desk. But, that's so important. Things like that, orienting your customers or, when they come on board, making a big deal. I call that the audition. The paid audition is the first step with a customer. Make it outstanding. Even have top people calling that customer and saying, thanks, the GM or whatever, the quality guy calling them up, saying, thanks for onboarding with us. We really appreciate it. Those things that don't cost anything, but go such a long way. I collect customer service stories, from the different companies, the famous Nordstrom return snow tire story, which I'm not sure it's true or not, but I've read it 1,000 times. And, the Zappos staying on the phone for 45 minutes to make sure the bride gets her shoes, things like that. I love those stories, and I look for those stories in our industry as well. So customer service, and lately I've been writing a lot about hiring. Don't call them millennials, don't call them Gen X's. You don't want to be called a boomer. Hiring, bringing them on board. How do you bring them on board? Show them about what we're building. We're building important stuff here. We're building stuff that kisses the stars. Teach them what they're working on. Don't just bring them in, put them in a plating shop, and they think they're, handling these pieces of copper. Show them what these pieces of copper do. I'm spending a lot of time on that, the hiring and training process. You're not giving them a job, you're giving them a career. So those are the things I spend a lot of time on.
Now, this is really interesting. You bring up the customer service aspect, and I have to tell you, I absolutely agree with you, especially when I go to buy boards or buy assemblies. I'm willing to pay a little bit more if I know that there is a person I can call and I'm highly likely to get through to them on their phone, or I know they're going to get back to me in a couple of hours if I end up having to email them.
Right.
I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that. I feel like there's a lot of risk if you just go by price and you can't get somebody on the phone when there's an issue. And the risk is, of course, defect in the assembly. But another risk when you're doing this as like a contractor or a freelancer is the time risk. How long is it going to take to get a simple issue solved? Can I get it done in 15 minutes? Or is it going to be a 3-day back and forth email thing and everyone's pulling their hair out? And then I got to tell the customer, like, I'm still waiting to hear back from them. I'm still waiting to hear back from them. I mean, that makes everybody look bad.
Yeah, you don't want to be the complainer. It's ugly to put you in that position. You want it easy. The same thing when there's a problem, we'll figure out whose fault it was later. Let's solve the problem. Things like that. I think that's really important. And the other thing is I always say, bring the customer to the table. Whatever you're doing, a staff meeting, have that customer right there. What good is this going to be to the customer? Whatever you're working on, is this going to be good to the customer or not? Oh, I'll bitch at it again. Hiring the automated phone system, and how good is this going to be to the customer? It used to be years ago, you would walk into a customer service department. It was like a Wall Street boiler room. People were on the phone and they were talking. Now it's just clicking. All it is clicking. And it's so easy to say no in an email, to say not getting the order, rather than, if you've come to me and we've had a relationship and you're selling me something, I'm going to think about it at 2 a.m. Man, Zach's coming in tomorrow and I got to say, I'm going another way. I'm not, that's really hard. It's so easy with an email. Who cares? That's customer service, those kinds of things. The customer at the table.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And then I also like being able to actually go into the facility if you're in the neighborhood and being able to talk to those people. There are a couple of facilities here in Portland, and it's always nice to be able to just walk in, go right into the will call department, get the assemblies, have someone say thank you, like you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And you definitely want to go back and do it again with them, even if it costs a little bit more.
Yeah. And that's even more valuable now post COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. They're gray buildings you can't walk into. You can't even get in the front door. There's no receptionist. You've got to call somebody up to be let in. And I know some of that is important with ITAR and all of that, but you could warm it up a little bit. It could be warmed up a little bit.
So the other thing that you brought up, which I thought was really interesting and a little unexpected, was the training aspect. This is something that I think folks in the industry have been sounding the alarm about, especially on the design side, as a lot of experienced designers kind of age out and retire, or they're asked to stay at their jobs longer to train a replacement and that kind of thing. I know Altium is focused on it along with some partners of Altium. You have like IPC and mm-hmm. PCEA also focusing on it pretty heavily. But you're talking about training in terms of how you treat people and not just like, we need more designers. Yeah. Let's create a course.
Yeah. I was very lucky. I didn't even know what a circuit board was. I won't get into the long story, but I went into a company called Main Electronics. It was, at that time, I didn't even know this. It was the number one board shop in the world. It was built by a genius named Dmitry Graby, and then he sold it to Rockwell International. And actually, at that time, I live in Maine. Maine was the China for California. And they actually bought this shop because of wages and hard work and all that. And it was like a Harvard. It was a white coat, white glove. We were building, at that time, the Minuteman missiles, eventually the shuttle program, all of these things. And we really learned a lot. And through that, I had mentors all the way through. And what I worked on mattered. We were told, the Minuteman missile is defending America from, the evil empire. And then later, the biggest one was the shuttle, because by then I was a sales manager for that shop. And I kept getting all these things from Rockwell, patches, and want some models of the shuttle. And, what is this shuttle? I'm 3,000 miles away. What are they talking about? We just build the boards. And then the shuttle went up and it was a rock star. Yeah. And all of a sudden there was this huge pride, and I started catching on to that. And then I watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And when the ship comes down and there's that French guy and all those guys are there, if you notice, the guys in the white coats had Rockwell logos on the back of their coats. And it taught me building stuff that matters. Years later, I was visiting salespeople in Florida. I was driving down in a beautiful morning and I see this star in the sky. And I said, what is that? And then I remembered I'd seen in USA Today that the shuttle was going up that morning. And it just 10 years later, it just filled me with pride of, I worked on boards, well, push boards, soul boards. They were guiding that thing. And it just always stuck with me. Every shop I work with is building things like that. And darn it, tell the young people or anybody who comes in that we're working on this stuff that goes to the moon. We're working on Da Vinci's that operate on people with cancer. We're working on these things. You go to a dentist office, it's loaded with circuit boards. Anywhere you go is show that pride. One last story is, and this story, but a lot of people don't. Medieval times, the guy walks into a site where they're building a building, and he goes up to the first guy and, what are you doing? I'm laying blocks. I'm a mason. I'm laying blocks. He goes up to the next guy. What are you doing? He says, I'm building a beautiful cathedral. And that's it right there. I'm building a beautiful cathedral. That's the kind of training, especially the newer generations. We will all do, but the newer generations want to have social conscious and they want to work on things that matter, and it all matters if you make it matter. All right, I'm done preaching.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, it creates such a pride in your work to know that like this is the bigger picture that you're a part of, instead of just focusing on this is the task, right? It's the bigger picture can be such a thing that you're proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all work together. The greatest period in science was when a president at the University of Houston, I think it was, said, we're going to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And we're going to do it before the end of a decade. And if you think, there's a great show, a documentary called Silicon Valley, not the one that's a comedy, but a real one. And it talks about how that statement changed everything. You couldn't go to the moon with a transistor. You had to go with a semiconductor. And if you think of in a time of peace, all the companies came together to make that happen. It shows you how powerful it is when we work on something that matters and something that's positive for the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we're going to have to leave it there because what a great way to end a podcast
I have
episode.
Nothing else to say, man. That's it.
Absolutely. Dan, your perspective is incredibly valuable. I like getting the folks who are much more experienced than myself to come on here and talk about some of this stuff. And I think it's going to help guide us into the future. So thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And keep doing this. What you do is so, so important. I completely value what you do, Zach. So
great.
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
To everyone that's out there listening, we've been talking with Dan Beaulieu, founder and president of DB Management Group. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to keep up with all of our podcast episodes and tutorials as they come out. And last but not least, don't stop learning, stay on track, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.